Greetings and namaste. This is Shiva, your friendly neighborhood wellness co-creator, coming at you with the mission, our mission of wellness for all. Wellness for you, wellness for me, wellness for everything and everyone we touch. Today's video is going to try and pick out some themes from but the most influential wellness role model in my life. And if you've seen some of my previous videos, one in particular, you might know who that is. This video is about my dearly beloved, now physically departed grandfather, ශ්‍රී and I was just thinking about, what were some things that really jumped out at me in terms of observing how he led a full life. He would have easily crossed 100 years old if it were not for just some things that happened along the way that I guess were meant to be, and yet he still carried on strongly, well past 90, almost into his mid-90s, which is just a miracle considering the era he grew up in. He witnessed the horrors of India being divided after India gained independence from the British. He had to practically see his home and people and things that he loved being lost, being separated horrifically at times, humanity burning in a sense. He had to deal with the loss of his life partner, yet he carried on for decades after her passing. Hats off to him. And the stories we all have of just toxic work environments, betrayed relationships, family and friends, financial setbacks, and health issues that eventually spin out of our control. But if I look at his life in totality, it's just an amazing journey. So without further ado, let's start getting into this. I think I have about 5 points that I could rattle off. Maybe we'll get into some more now or at a later point. But let's start with the first one. Can you guess what it might be? Let me give you a hint. It begins with the sun, or maybe before it. So here's the thing about Grandpa. Nay, or Nana, I used to call him for short. He kept time. He didn't keep time in a sort of defense forces type of thing, got to be stickler for time. But he kept his own clock. He kept his own time. He would wake up at roughly the same time every morning, sans an alarm clock. he would have a certain routine that he would go through every morning. Not a very box routine in that sense of I must do this, but an organized routine. He had a time and a place for everything. If he needed a wake up call in the morning with a cup of tea, for instance, it happened at a particular time because he woke up at a consistent time every day. And if breakfast was gonna be like omelets, eggs, that was a favorite of his, or it was gonna be something more Indian style like paranthas, which are kind of thick tortillas, if you will, with or without some veggie stuffing, had along with yogurt and maybe some pickle, Indian pickle called achar. He would stick to that. He would set things in motion, and the kitchen would be up and running. So all of this happened on time. And then the rest of the day would be taken on with some purpose, with some energy, with that firm foundation set. In later years, as his schedule got more flexible, he would enjoy taking a little power nap in the middle of the day, the afternoons. And again, like clockwork, he wouldn't oversleep, he wouldn't undersleep. He would just lay down, either in the bedroom or even on another sort of twin bed or full bed that was in one of the passageways in the house, and just grab some winks there, just stretch out. And then as the sun went down, kind of the same thing. Let's have the last meal of the day. And let's not have it too late again. Let's have it at a reasonable time. His time was generally, 8:30. And go to sleep at maybe 11 or so. After just some conversations with family mostly. Maybe, initially when I was growing up, of course, with him, there was no TV, but later on, many decades later, TV became part of that nightly wind down. But as I look back, I'm like, he was not a yogi in the bookish sense of it, or the traditional sense of the word, or anything of that nature. But nor was he a Ayurveda enthusiast as such. But a lot of these things aligned really well with those principles. He was disciplined. When I say he kept his own clock, he kept his own time, he was disciplined about how he went about it. And I think that's a cornerstone of wellness. You have to be disciplined about it. You can't be slack on wellness. And if one is slack on wellness, one better make sure that one overcompensates, so that slackness doesn't really matter one way or the other. So he was respectful, he was aware, he was acutely aware of his physical, his physiological, his energy needs. And he set up a framework. He organized a framework that maximized his own potential. And so it's hard for me, like if someone asked me, what was the best day in his life? For me, it would be every day. Because that's how he showed up. He showed up fully every day. That's a committed, disciplined life. The ୃ₀₁₃₈, the 3 pillars of Ayurveda, diet, rest, and being discriminatory in the use of one's senses. He checked all those boxes, He nourished himself. He took those rest breaks when they were most needed. He didn't burn the candle at either end, definitely not both ends. And he took a midday breather, and yet his day was long and productive. He made sure he nourished himself with wholesome foods. He loved cooking, he was a foodie. And he had a strong digestion that everything contributed to because of how he approached life in entirety. So that's the first thing that comes to mind, and that's the more maybe physical, Annamaya Kosh piece of this. Again, I'm harking back to some of my previous videos for those who are with the program. Otherwise, here's your chance. Check out some of those videos. Second thing that comes to mind is he laughed often. He had this endearing habit sometimes bordering on the, oh no, not again, not another grandpa joke kind of thing, Because it wasn't just another grandpa joke. Half the time it was the same joke being repeated to a potentially new audience with, some of the old audience still around. But the idea wasn't about, the focus wasn't on the joke. It was the experience of the joke, right? It wasn't the content of the joke, it was the experience. And each and every time he would narrate the joke, he would be like a little baby almost, chuckling and be half in splits before the punchline even came. And one would just enjoy that process of just watching him narrate that for the nth time. And the zth time, or the zedit time, however that goes. I can't even pronounce it. And that is so important. I just look at the world rush by. We live overlooking a freeway here. And you kind of see the cars whizzing by one after the other. Vroom, 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 vroom. This endless circling of the bush, as it were. There's nothing wrong with circling the bush, but when one does it without full engagement, without joy, without childlike quality of exploration, of wonder, of curiosity, of doing that same darn thing yet again, but laughing out loud till one's belly hurts, that's the piece that's missing. And I'm like, if there's anything I can learn from Grandpa, it's to engage fully and to laugh till my belly hurts. And do it as much as possible. I think it's rarer than you and I might think. It's not that common, and it seems to be dwindling fast as the world continues to rush along, as newsmakers make all kinds of news, but nothing that really stirs true joy within. In fact, it's to the contrary. It stirs up fear and insecurity and, feelings of polarization and whatnot. So keeping time and laughing often. Keeping time in a very self-aware manner. Laughing often like a baby. Those are two that stand out. The third one. He was a win-win person. To the extent that it was amazing to watch him negotiate all kinds of conflict. Many, and this is maybe again another thing, many people recognized that skill in him and they came to him for advice. Friends, family, co-workers. He wasn't a counselor or, therapist by profession or by vocation. But he might as well have been, because if I start counting the people that would have gained from just pouring out their problems to him and walking back lighter, boy, I'd be working for months on that list. But his approach was not just solution-oriented, but harmony-oriented. And that was one of his pet words, harmony. And he used to sort of liken it to Hindi words, har. Actually, not Hindi words. It was like two Punjabi words, really, technically. Har, mani. So har means defeat or surrender, and mani means acceptance in this context. So like sometimes we say, let's agree to disagree. That wasn't good enough for him. And if I look at why that was the case, my guess is because when one agrees to disagree, it's not always in the true spirit of what that means. Because truly agreeing to disagree means to honor and respect the other side as much, if not more so, than one's own. And that requires putting aside one's ego, one's own stake in the game, one's own need to be right, to come out victorious. That I was right and I won this argument and whatnot. But he was all about the path of surrender and this beautiful acceptance of surrender, where surrender was the path to harmony. Is it really worth it to disagree? How long is that disagreement relevant? Is it today? Is it all of the rest of this week? Is it for next year at a certain date that thing might resolve? Or is it a lifetime thing? He was more like, let's be done with it, It's not the end of the world. Nothing really is. Let's move on. That was a winning attitude. Which brings me to the next one. He traveled light. He traveled light. I'm not talking about when he would go visit someone or be traveling outside of the home city or something, but he didn't take on more weight, more burden than he needed, than was necessary, than was essential. And kind of teeing off from the previous living in harmony mindset, he didn't harbor grudges. He didn't harbor negative energy. He didn't let these wounds, these psychological, emotional, deep-seated wounds fester. He dealt with them. He dealt with them in a way that was almost saintly, because he took himself out of the equation. He took judgment out of the equation, and he looked at the big picture as to, where's this gonna get me? Where's this gonna get so-and-so? To a better place? No. Let it go. Give it up. Surrender. Not worth it. Travel light. Keep the essential stuff. Keep the brush. Keep the clean clothes. Don't have to carry a ton of books, Because he was a people person. He wasn't a reader by any stretch of the imagination. But he could read people. He could read life. Brings me to the next one, which you've probably guessed. He engaged fully with life. He truly embraced each day for what it was. Like I said before, it's hard for me to pick out a landmark day in his life. I mean, he got awards and he was recognized and he was felicitated by community. But every day, at least a dozen, maybe I'm undercounting here, maybe a couple of dozen people would show up at his doorstep. And even more when my grandma was alive, she was a feisty beacon of, energy and just amazingness in her own right. And their house was abuzz with all kinds of people from all walks of life, all ages, all parts of society, streaming in and just having this beautiful engagement and interaction. And so, coming back to Grandpa, that's the home he continued to maintain even after Grandma passed away. For tens of years after that. And it wasn't just like it was a, madhouse. It was a very organized madhouse, It wasn't as if you never knew what was happening or things were strewn about. Someone would ring the doorbell, they would be welcomed in, quality time would be spent with them, traditional Indian hospitality. Serving beverages and snacks and having some, sometimes heart-to-heart conversations, sometimes just some crazy belly laugh conversations, but meaningful conversations, joyful conversations where everyone left feeling their cup was fuller than how they came in. Definitely an ideal to live up to. In fact, I wonder if he had been around for the pandemic, how that might have worked out. Maybe people would just have shown up anyway. Maybe positive vibes would have the upper hand over any kind of virus. I don't know. Probably never will. But those are some great lessons, and there, like I said, so many parallels with yoga and Ayurveda. Being self-aware and keeping time. Laughing often like a child. Keeping that innocence alive every time you say the same old darn joke, And taking this harmony, this attitude of harmony. Let everyone prosper. Let all beings be in harmony. Let's not waste time over stuff that's really not going to matter at the end of today. Forget about the last breath. Let's embrace life fully. What else is there? What's the difference between a robot and a human if we're not really experiencing life every moment, every day? So yeah, I think that's the lot. And maybe I'll give you one more, which is, he was, from a yoga perspective, he was like the epitome of karma yoga, the yoga of selfless action. He was a people person, Like I said, he traveled light and he didn't need books to read. He just needed people to engage with. He did so much for so many without even being asked. He would literally go out of his way almost every day, at least once, to help someone with his connections, with the respect he had in this community, with his almost thinking out of the box, of how can we make this work. Countless people. And not one person. It would be impossible for me to find a person who had anything but good stuff to say about him. He wasn't perfect, He wasn't like I said, Nobel Prize winner, or he didn't do something that he didn't do like one thing that knocked the ball out of the park, but he knocked it really far on many fronts. And from an Ayurveda sense, that's one of the most balanced people I know. Well, again, I'm so fortunate, so blessed to have spent many, many wonderful years with him up until his last days, which weren't fun to watch. But he was a trooper. He was a trooper all through. And I'm just glad that I had that experience, and I'm here to share that with you. So I invite you to just, take some time and pay homage to the wellness champions in your life. perhaps there was just one thing they did that really stuck out for you. But boy, was that thing so them, it really resonated. You really remember that clear as day. It really made an impression. Think about some of those people in your life, some of those wellness role models, those champions of life, as it were. And take a few minutes just to sit, if they're alive, give them a call, maybe have a socially distanced meeting. If they're no longer physically available to you, then sit with their memory, sit with their legacy, celebrate all that they contributed to your life and probably still can, if only we take the time to honor them, to celebrate the lovely lessons of life they left behind for us that are still around. So on that note, I bid you adieu. Wellness for all.